Yes, I would. Thank you, everybody, for joining the Longmeadow Adult Center presentation this afternoon. On behalf of the Longmeadow Adult Center and Storrs Library, welcome to our virtual program on Pearl Harbor. I am Jim Layden, the director of the Longmeadow Adult Center. With us, we also have librarian Becky Bukowskis from Storrs Library, who is co-hosting today's program. Today is sponsored by LACCF, the Longmeadow Adult Center Community Fund. Please stick around with us after the program to hear about our new building progress from Mary Beth Bergeron. We will begin this afternoon with a presentation by Professor Gary Lefort. Professor Lefort is a retired Army veteran, was an associate professor at AIC. He earned his MBA from BU and his BBA from UMass. He is currently on the board of directors for the World Affair Council of Western Massachusetts. He will be followed by a virtual tour of the USS Missouri by Daniel Parsons, the education director of the Battleship Missouri Memorial in Honolulu, Hawaii, making this our farthest virtual program we have done so far. So you have been muted, and we will leave all questions until the end of the presentation. Thank you again for joining us, everybody, and we hope you enjoy the program.
Okay, and just one more thing, we are recording today. We're going to share with LCTV and Valley Eye Radio, and thank you to our presenters for allowing us to share with them. And now I'll ask Professor Lefort to unmute himself and he can begin.
I think
Gary, just a minute, you're muted, 1 minute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, Gary.
Okay, good. Well, good afternoon. Welcome to the Longmeadow Adult Center in Storrs Library virtual program on Pearl Harbor. And giving my talk today, I would like to discuss not only the December 7th Pearl Harbor attack, but also the Pearl Harbor legacy that has evolved over the past 79 years. At the end of my talk, I will pay tribute to the military men and women who unselfishly put their own lives at risk in trying to save the lives of their fellow soldiers and sailors during the attack. History shows that the 1930s and 1940s was a very turbulent period in U.S.-Japanese relations. Japan's invasion of Manchuria in 1931 met strong opposition from the U.S. and began the downward deterioration of diplomatic relations between the two countries. This deterioration intensified with the start of the Sino-Japanese War in the Nanjing Massacre in 1937. In an attempt to stop further Japanese expansion in Indochina, the U.S. provided military and economic assistance to China. However, this did not stop Japanese aggression. In 1940, Japan's expansion continued into French Indochina. The U.S. responded with economic sanctions against Japan, further straining diplomatic relations between the two countries. It is at this point that President Franklin Roosevelt decided to move the U.S. Pacific Fleet to Pearl Harbor in the Pacific Island and to build up U.S. military forces in the Philippines as a deterrent to further military expansion by Japan in Southeast Asia. During this period, both the U.S. and Japan continued diplomatic negotiations to end the growing escalation in Indochina in Southeast Asia. By 1941, it became clear that the U.S. economic sanctions were not working. With the Japanese seizure of French Indochina in July 1941, the U.S. decided to stop oil exports to Japan. Japan, in response to this, turned towards the oil-rich reserves of the Dutch East Indies in August 1941. President Roosevelt again warned Japan against further expansion in Southeast Asia. In September 1941, Japan joined a tripartite pact with Germany and Italy, which did not, however, require the signatories to come to the aid of each other in the case of war. It appeared that Japan had reached the point of no return. Negotiations were failing with the US. Japan needed the raw materials of Southeast Asia, especially its oil reserves, to continue military expansion in Asia. And the US was seen as a major stumbling block to Japan in achieving its goals. Preliminary military planning for the Pearl Harbor attack began in early 1941, with the Japanese emperor giving his approval in November 1941. On December 7th, 1941, US time, Japan sent a diplomatic notification to Washington, D.C., which did not reach the Washington leadership until after the attack was underway due to diplomatic and communications delays. The notification cited that negotiations were failing, but however, made no reference to a formal declaration of war or the planned attack on Pearl Harbor. The Pearl Harbor attack was a preemptive surprise air attack by Japan to destroy US ability to interfere with Japanese military operations in Asia. The attack originated from a Japanese fleet of 6 aircraft carriers stationed approximately 230 miles north of the Hawaiian Islands. The attack employed over 350 aircraft, fighters, dive bombers, and torpedo bombers, launched in 2 waves, with the first wave attacking at 7:55 a.m., followed by the second wave, with the attack ending before 10 a.m. that day. During the 2 hours, the U.S. Pacific's fleet battleships parked in Battleship Row were attacked, with 4 battleships sunk. They were the USS Arizona, the Oklahoma, the West Virginia, and California. And 4 battleships were damaged: the USS Nevada, the Pennsylvania, the Maryland, and the Tennessee. In addition to the battleships, 3 cruisers, 3 destroyers, 1 target ship, and 1 main mine-laying ship were also destroyed. Besides the naval damage, military airfields in and around Pearl Harbor were attacked, resulting in 188 aircraft destroyed and 159 damaged. As a result of the attack, 2,403 Americans were killed and 1,178 wounded. The U.S. Pacific Fleet's 3 aircraft carriers, however, were not in port at the time of the attack. The USS Enterprise was at Wake Island. The USS Lexington was at the Midway Islands, and the U.S. Saratoga was in the States for a ship overhaul. The Japanese fleet lost only 29 aircraft, 5 midget submarines, and 64 military servicemen. I thought I'd show you a couple of pictures showing the damage after the attack. The 2 that I decided to show is the U.S. Arizona and the U.S. Oklahoma. Both ships were sunk and resulted in the heavy loss of sailors who were on board at the time. The first, let's see if everybody can see it. The first picture is the U.S. Arizona. It was completely sunk. The only thing that was showing was the superstructure. The reason why it sunk so fast is that the bomb hit a magazine bunker on board the ship in a matter of minutes. The ship fell to the floor of the of the harbor. 1,177 men were lost. The second picture is the USS Oklahoma. It likewise sunk. It was sunk by multiple torpedo hits that caused the ship to completely capsize in a matter of 12 minutes. It likewise resulted in the loss of 429 sailors and Marines. The loss in the two ships totaled roughly 1,600 men, which represented roughly 2/3 of the total casualties during the attack. If you remember earlier, I had mentioned that that was 2,403. As you can see from the photos, the U.S. was in a state of shock after the attack. How could the U.S. be so surprised by an attack of this magnitude? And looking at the historical evidence, U.S. intelligence was pointing towards some type of military action by Japan as economic sanctions, especially stopping oil exports to Japan, was making it more difficult for Japan to continue its expansion in Asia. U.S. military strategists anticipated that an attack would occur in Southeast Asia in the direction of the Philippines, as well as attacks on the British and Dutch colonial territories. An attack beyond Southeast Asia was possible, but not considered, but was considered highly improbable. Pearl Harbor was about 4,000 miles from Japan. Weather, Japanese naval logistics, U.S. estimates of the Japanese naval strength, and U.S. aerial detection did not support a first strike at Pearl Harbor. On the day of the attack, several instances also happened that should have alerted Pearl Harbor of an attack. First was the detection and engagement of a Japanese submarine at the entrance to Pearl Harbor early that morning. Even though reported, the incident did not trigger an alert. Second was the detection of a large flight of aircraft approaching Pearl Harbor by a radar target team, which was reported but misidentified as a group of B-17 bombers coming from the States. The flight was the first wave of the attack. The pieces of the puzzle were there. Unfortunately, they're not being connected together. It is questionable, even if connected together, that there would have been sufficient time to give the alert. The Japanese had done their planning meticulously. The attack was planned for early Sunday morning when the ships were not fully manned. Early U.S. intelligence coming out of Washington had increased the security posture at Pearl Harbor, but the intelligence didn't project a possible air attack at Pearl Harbor. And the USS Enterprise, which was approaching Pearl Harbor on the morning of December 7th, was unable to influence the outcome of the attack. The day after the attack, December 8th, President Roosevelt addressed a joint session of Congress and delivered his famous words, a date that will live in infamy, and requested a declaration of war against the Empire of Japan. The U.S. Congress approved the request the same day. On December 11th, 1941, Germany and Italy, members of the tripartite pact with Japan, declared war on the U.S., and the U.S. Congress immediately declared war against both countries the same day. In looking back at the Pearl Harbor attack, I think several comments are worth making. First, Japan's military plan did include a third wave to attack Pearl Harbor's fuel depots, ammunition dumps, and naval infrastructure like the shipyard, repair shops, storage facilities, and submarine base. However, Japan's fear of a U.S. counterattack, both air and naval, resulted in the third wave not taking place. Japan also realized that the element of surprise had been lost. If the third wave attack had occurred and been successful, it would have significantly delayed the U.S. capability to launch a counterattack by Japan in the Pacific. Some estimates were that the delay could have been as much as a year or more, maybe even up to 2 years, if the infrastructure had been completely destroyed. Two, by having the naval infrastructure intact after the attack, the U.S. Pacific Fleet was able to get 6 of the 8 battleships back into service as early as 1942, because the attack occurred in the shallow waters of Pearl Harbor. The U.S. Navy was likewise able to set up an extensive naval logistics network operating from Pearl Harbor, not from the United States, which expedited the U.S. buildup in the Pacific theater. 3, according to Admiral Chester Nimitz, who replaced Admiral Kimball at Pearl Harbor. Admiral Kimball was the commander at the time of the attack. According to Admiral Nimitz, the extensive damage inflicted on the fleet at Pearl Harbor could have been far more devastating if the U.S. Pacific Fleet had received sufficient notice on warning to engage the Japanese attack force at sea. Without its aircraft carriers, the U.S. fleet would have faced a superior Japanese naval force. A significant number of U.S. aircraft ships and aircrafts would have been lost, not to mention heavy loss of soldiers and sailors' lives at sea. 4, the Pearl Harbor attack also changed the way naval warfare was conducted in World War II. Prior to the start of World War II, battleships were the centerpiece for naval warfare. With the destruction of the battleships at Pearl Harbor, the U.S. naval leadership refocused its attention to its air carriers and the submarine force for naval power projection. The battle at Midway in June 1942 was a decisive aircraft carrier battle in the Pacific that broke the back of the Imperial Japanese Navy. And 5, and finally, the U.S. declaration of war against Japan was not a declaration of war against Germany and Italy. It was Germany and Italy who declared war on the United States on December 11th, 1941, thus forcing the U.S. into the European War. Why did Hitler decide to declare war on the U.S.? That would be an interesting discussion for another time.
Professor, this is Dan Parsons. Would you mind if I interrupt and we go live to Pearl Harbor for a few minutes?
Yes.
Would that be all right?
No, fine.
This is live from Pearl Harbor right now.
Dan, is there sound?
There is, but there's no. I have no other control over what they're outputting.
Okay.
Dan, when you screen share, you can hit optimize for sound share. There's a little button to click.
I believe what we're seeing right now is the Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day celebration at Pearl Harbor.
That's correct, Professor. There'll be a short introduction. Then you'll see possibly a flyover, and you'll see a ship passing in review. It should take about 10 minutes if everybody's okay with that. It'll be the exact time of the attack.
Okay, no, that's fine.
Individuals, you might be able to increase your volume on your own computer. The official parties are arriving right now.
United States Pacific Fleet arriving. Sideways vote. It is customary on December 7th that we observe a moment of silence at 7:55 to commemorate the beginning of the attacks on Harbor. At 7:55, we hear the sound of the USS Arizona ship's bell, joined by Park Ranger Daniel Brown, to mark the start of our moment of silence. Completing the moment of silence will be F-22 Raptors in the 199th and 19th Fighter Squadron, known as the executing a missing man flyer before me, just beyond the USS Arizona Memorial in Liverpool.
In honor of those who lost their lives in the defense of their country 79 years ago today. The missing man formation was first used by the United States military in 1938. While aircraft have evolved and modernized since then, the concept of paying tribute to the fallen with this aerial salute is still used at funerals and memorials today. You may see one aircraft pull away from the formation and fly high into the clouds to honor the lives lost on December 7th. This tactic of a single aircraft pulling away from the group was not part of the original missing man formation, but has come to be a routine element since the end of World War II. It represents a lost comrade departing while humanity and the mission at hand continue. The gap in the formation symbolizes our fallen comrades and demonstrates to all that we shall always remember their sacrifice. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, please bow your heads as we observe a moment of silence to honor the events that occurred at this moment 79 years ago today. We thank the 199th and 19th Fighter Squadrons for participating in today's ceremony. Please remain standing for morning colors and the performance of our national anthem and state song by the U.S. Pacific Fleet Band. Bugler, sound, attention. Parade the colors.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare
this time we invite Admiral Aquilino, Superintendent Birch, and Admiral Chadwick to the center of the contemplation circle. It is customary for ships passing the USS Arizona Memorial to pay their respects by rendering honors. Approaching, you will see the Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer USS Michael Murphy, commanded by Commander Scott Maloney, a native of Boston, Massachusetts. Today, in addition to rendering honors to the USS Arizona crew still entombed in their watery grave, Michael Murphy will also render honors to the Pearl Harbor survivors and World War II veterans who are watching online with us today. The veterans who couldn't be with us today represent the greatest generation of all American history. No one before them and no one since has been asked to answer the call to serve and sacrifice in the way that they were between the years of 1941 and 1945. The official party will return the salute on behalf of the greatest generation to the USS Michael Murphy as she passes close aboard. Hey, salute! Ready, two.
Professor, I hope you didn't mind the interruption, but it was, I was able to pull that up live from the Park Service, so.
Oh, no, not at all. Matter of fact, I think
Right.
it makes today's program even more special.
I hope so. Lindsay, appreciate you letting me ad-lib a little bit there.
Thank you. That was perfect, Daniel.
Sorry.
United States Air Force for participating in today's in Hawaiian culture.
Okay, you're back on, sir. Thank you very much.
Okay, it was very special, especially being a military myself. Okay, do you want me to get back in my talk or? Lindsay?
Yep, Daniel, you're muted. Yes, Gary, you can continue. Thank you so much.
Okay, good. I thought the last 10 minutes was extremely special considering, you know, what we're talking about right now. I'll mention in a few minutes that in 1994, the US Congress declared December 7th a National Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day. And so obviously as a very, very important day at Pearl Harbor today. Picking up where I left off, in the first part of my talk, I tried to sort of talk about Pearl Harbor, the attack, and some of the consequences and results coming out of it. What I'd like to do now is basically go into a discussion of Pearl Harbor over the last 79 years. As I put my talk together, another story started to unfold. Pearl Harbor was becoming a living testimony to the greatest generation who gave so much to preserve the American way of life for future generations. I believe that this legacy started to take form with the Pearl Harbor's Survivor Association, which was founded in 1958 with its membership composed of Pearl Harbor military survivors. The association's motto was, "Remember Pearl Harbor, keep America alert." In 1985, the US Congress recognized the Pearl Harbor Survivors Association as an official veterans organization. In December 2011, the Pearl Harbor Survivors Association closed its biannual reunions due to its aging membership and their declining health. Membership at the time was about 2,700 members. Today, descendants of the Pearl Harbor survivors are carrying on the mission of the association through the national organization called the Sons and Daughters of Pearl Harbor Survivors. In 1990, the US Congress approved the Pearl Harbor Commemorative Medal, also called the Pearl Harbor Survivor Medal, in celebration of Pearl Harbor's 50th anniversary in 1991. It was issued to military service people who participated in combat operations against the Japanese attack at Pearl Harbor. In 1996, the US Congress authorized the medal for civilians who could show that they participated in combat operations against the Japanese attack at Pearl Harbor. This medal is no longer issued. Let me show you briefly a picture of the medal. Hopefully everybody can see it. It's about 1.5 inches in diameter. It's made out of bronze metal. On the front side, you have a battleship that says, remember Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941. On the back side, you have a eagle that says the date that will live in infamy for those who have served. In 1994, the U.S. Congress passed Public Law 103-308, which declared December 7th as National Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day. Even though it is not a federal holiday, the American flag is flown at half-staff until sunset to honor those Americans who lost their lives during the Pearl Harbor attack. Each year, the U.S. President makes a national proclamation. Since December 7th, 2011, the city of Honolulu in Hawaii has hosted the Pearl Harbor Memorial Day Parade. Its theme is remembering our past and celebrating our future. And as a military, this next thing that I'm going to read really means an awful lot. In 2003, the U.S. Defense POW and MIA accounting agency started a program to identify the remains of unknown soldiers from the USS Oklahoma, the USS West Virginia, and the USS California. By December 2019, 250 sailors remains have been identified and returned to their families for burial. Advances in DNA technology has made this program possible. There are also a number of historical sites at Pearl Harbor and Fort Island that carry on the legacy of the Pearl Harbor attack. The first one I'm going to talk about is the USS Arizona Memorial, which we just saw a few minutes ago. It was dedicated on May 30th, 1962 as a war memorial. Entombed under the memorial are the remains of the 1,177 soldiers who went down with the USS Arizona that I mentioned to you earlier. Only 335 sailors survived the attack. A major fundraiser for the memorial was Elvis Presley, who held a benefit concert on March 25th, 1961, and raised more than $54,000 for the memorial. In 1982, the U.S. Navy allowed USS Arizona survivors after their death to be interned in the ship. 44 USS Arizona survivors have been laid to rest in the ship. The last survivor was Lauren Brunner, 98 years old, who died in 2019. This is a picture of the USS Arizona. I don't know if you can see it, but I tried to get a picture that was an aerial picture that would give you an appreciation of the silhouette of the USS Arizona that lies beneath the memorial and entombs the 1,177 sailors. The next memorial that I would like to talk about is the USS Oklahoma Memorial, which was dedicated on December 7, 2007 as a war memorial in commemoration of the 429 men who lost their lives when the battleship was sunk during the attack. The memorial is located on Fort Island, adjacent to the USS Missouri Memorial, and consists of 429 individually marked white marble columns. This is a picture of that memorial. Each of the columns is dedicated to one of the men who died on board the ship. The column is 7 feet high and weighs about 120 20 pounds. The next memorial that I'd like to talk about is the U.S.-Utah Memorial, which was dedicated in 1972 as a war memorial to the 58 crew members who died that day, with 54 of them entombed in the ship. The memorial is on the northwest shore of Fort Island, overlooking the ship wreckage. And so it's basically on the other side of the island where you would find the USS Arizona in the USS Missouri. There is an additional person entombed in the ship, baby Nancy Lynn Wagner, daughter of Chief Yeoman Albert Wagner. Nancy had died 2 days after birth in 1937, and her father had brought her ashes aboard ship to spread her ashes while at sea. The USS Utah was sunk during the Pearl Harbor attack, with her father surviving, but he was unable to retrieve her ashes. To this day, baby Nancy lays at rest alongside the U.S. Utah crew. The last, this is a picture of that memorial. Again, you'll see the deck that's going into the water is the actual memorial itself. The wreckage of the ship, the USS Utah, you can see in the foreground. The last historical site that I want to talk about really doesn't have a direct connection to the Pearl Harbor attack, and that is the USS Missouri. It is anchored in Pearl Harbor, adjacent to the U.S. Arizona Memorial. Japan surrendered to the U.S. and its allies on September 2nd, 1945 in Tokyo Bay, Japan, aboard the USS Missouri. A 30-minute virtual tour of the USS Missouri will follow my presentation. And this is a picture of the USS Missouri at anchor in Pearl Harbor. I don't believe that you can talk about the Pearl Harbor attack without bringing Japan into the discussion. Japan will argue that the U.S. at the time of the attack had forced Japan into a corner with the U.S. economic sanctions, especially stopping oil exports to Japan in late 1941. The war was inevitable, so Japan decided to make the first strike through the surprise attack at Pearl Harbor. The results and consequences of that attack are now history. Since the ending of World War II, the U.S. and Japan have been working hard in rebuilding its diplomatic, economic, and military ties. In 2016, two momentous events occurred which helped to further the U.S.-Japanese relations. On May 27, 2016, U.S. President Barack Obama visited the Hiroshima Memorial in Japan, and on December 27, 2016, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe visited the USS Arizona Memorial. At the USS Arizona Memorial, both leaders really struggled to find the right words reflecting reconciliation in sorrow for the loss of so many lives. Let me briefly quote Prime Minister Abe's remarks that day, and I quote, "President Obama and the people of the United States of America and the people around the world, as the Prime Minister of Japan, I offer my sincere and everlasting condolence to the souls of those who lost their lives here, as well as to the spirit of all brave men and women whose lives were taken by a war that commenced in this very place, and also to the souls of the countless innocent people who became the victims of the war," unquote. U.S. President Obama thanked Prime Minister Abe for his visit to the USS Arizona Memorial and said, and I quote, "Thank you for your presence here today. an historic gesture that speaks to the power of reconciliation and the alliance between the American and Japanese people. A reminder that even the deepest wounds of war cannot give way, can give way to friendship and lasting peace, unquote. U.S. Department of Defense records show that well over 100 military medals for heroic acts of bravery were rewarded as results of the Pearl Harbor attack. These medals included 15 Medals of Honor, 51 Navy Crosses, and 53 Silver Star medals. I would like to, for a brief moment or two, mention several of these recipients. The first one is U.S. Navy Chief Petty Officer John Williams Finn. He was stationed at Kaneohe Air Station. He received the Medal of Honor. He manned a 50 caliber machine gun for over 2 hours in defense of the air station. Despite multiple wounds, he continued to engage the enemy until the attack was over. After the attack, he received medical treatment and went back to duty and helped to rearm fighter aircraft. For his heroics, he received the Medal of Honor, the only Medal of Honor given for combat action during the Pearl Harbor attack. He died in 2010 at the age of 100. The next recipient that I want to mention is U.S. Navy Cook First Class Doris Doherty Miller. He was assigned to the USS West Virginia. He received the Navy Cross. He manned a 50 caliber machine gun as an untrained gunner and successfully engaged Japanese aircraft, being credited with the kill of a number of aircraft. He was the first African-American to receive the Navy Cross. Later in the war, he was assigned to a naval warship which was sunk in 1943 by a Japanese submarine with the loss of all hands on board. In 2020, this current year, the U.S. Navy announced that a Navy aircraft carrier scheduled for launch in 2028 would be named after Doris Miller. The last recipient that I want to mention is U.S. Army Corps Nurse First Lieutenant Annie G. Fox. She was stationed at Hickam Field. She received the Purple Heart Medal, which was later replaced with the Bronze Star Medal. She was the first woman to receive the Purple Heart Medal for her outstanding performance as chief nurse at the Hickam Field Hospital. As the war unfolded, recipients of the Purple Heart Medal was changed to those wounded in combat action. Since First Lieutenant Fox was not wounded at the Hickam Field, the Purple Heart Medal was changed to the Bronze Star Medal in 1944. She died in 1987 at the age of 93. As of 2020, this year, my best estimate is that there are well under 100 Pearl Harbor survivors. It has been difficult to determine the number since the Pearl Harbor Survivors Organization closed its door in 2011. Of the 335 sailors who survived the U.S. Arizona, only 2 sailors have survived. Lou Conter, 98 years old, from Grass Valley, California. Howard Kenton Potts, 98 years old, from Provo, Utah. And a third survivor, Donald Stratton, 97 years old, from Colorado Springs, Colorado, who died earlier this year. He died on February 15th, 2020. Let me bring my talk to an end by asking the following question. Why is it important to remember Pearl Harbor? I watched well, let me backtrack just a minute. I think there's several ways that you can answer this. I watched a Pearl Harbor attack documentary that was narrated by a movie actor, Tom Selleck. This was in 2016, and it was commemorating the 75th anniversary of the Pearl Harbor attack. There is extensive footage of the mass destruction inflicted on the battleship row, Pearl Harbor in military airfield. Death was everywhere. The documentary also interviewed Pearl Harbor survivors who shared their personal stories of that fateful day of December 7th, 1941. In watching the documentary, one thing that comes out clearly is that these sailors and soldiers wanted Americans, especially future generations, to remember Pearl Harbor and the pain and the sufferings, and for some, the ultimate sacrifice made to preserve the American way of life. Freedom is not free. It comes with a high price and can be lost in a moment if we as Americans are not willing to stand up and fight for what we believe in. The second point I want to make is that in reviewing the last 79 years since the Pearl Harbor attack, another message unfolded as well. We as a country have worked very hard to leave a Pearl Harbor legacy for future generations. Also worked hard to bring about peace and mutual respect between ourselves and the Japanese people. The scars from Pearl Harbor are deep. The scars will always be there, but our future is not living in the past, but rather looking to the future. I believe that President Obama's visit to the Hiroshima Memorial in May 2016, followed by the Japanese Prime Minister Abe's visit to the USS Arizona Memorial in December 2016, is a true testament that enemies can become friends over time. I also came across stories of the National Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day celebrations in Hawaii, which we observed briefly a little bit earlier. Over the years have brought together Pearl Harbor survivors and Japanese survivors in the attack, found peace and reconciliation and even friendship by sharing their deep sorrows, their pains, their personal regrets resulting from this tragic day in history. Thank you for joining me today. After the U.S. Missouri tour, I will be available to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor. Now we'll hear from Daniel, please.
All right. Well, I appreciate